Okay, today we're going to talk about Lambda Invocation. So, what do we mean by Lambda Invocation? What we mean is, how do we start Lambda functions? So here we've got an example Lambda function. It's called start EC2 function. What it's going to do for us is we use it as part of a scheduling mechanism to turn on and off development instances. So we save cost by running them only during the day when there are people that actively need to use them. How do we make that Lambda function do what we need? Well, we need to trigger that function to run. And the way we do that is using the invoke function API call to the Lambda API. And we do that by using a EventBridge scheduled event, which sends the Lambda invocation call with an appropriate payload. So EventBridge both lets you send events from other AWS services and trigger other downstream events from that. But it also lets you schedule events. So in this instance, we might say, right, Monday to Friday at 7 a.m., we want to turn our development instances on so people can get on with work. So in that case, we would have EventBridge trigger. It would send an EventBridge payload to the invoke function call. And the EC2 function would then, the Lambda function would go and start the appropriate instances, so the development instances in this case. There are many other ways you can invoke Lambda, and this is what makes Lambda so powerful. So you can have it invoked when an object is put into an S3 bucket. You can have it invoked when a message is sent to an SNS topic. That's an extremely powerful pattern. And you can also put messages on an SQS queue and have Lambda process those. What's really great about that is Lambda is effectively doing full auto-scaling for you. And because Lambda functions take only milliseconds to start, it can be really, really efficient at processing many, many messages from an SQS queue. And it can do as many operations in parallel as it needs to work on that queue, and it costs you nothing at all when there are no messages on that queue to be processed. API gateway is another common way you would invoke a Lambda function. In that case, you would be doing it typically from an HTTP call. We actually have a separate tutorial on that, so I won't go into detail here, but API gateway lets you invoke the functions and also add things like cognito authentication, and have throttling, things like that. For more simple use cases, you can use a Lambda URL, which gives you essentially just a plain HTTPS endpoint that you can connect to and will invoke the Lambda function for you. If you need to do programmatic execution of Lambda functions from perhaps outside of AWS, you can either write code using the AWS SDK to do that, or you can just have a simple bash script that uses the AWS CLI to execute the Lambda function, obviously in conjunction probably with long-lived access keys. And that's very, very powerful. Again, you could, for example, have something on-prem that fires up a load of instances in AWS via triggering a Lambda function, does some work, and then shuts those down again. So a lot of flexibility offered by this pattern. Until next time, enjoy the cloud.